start in about 2 minutes, so if you need to grab some water or some more peach cobbler or the last
Don't be afraid.
so everybody's being polite and only taking a part of the last piece that's left. You can help yourself with some water or something. We're going to get started in about 4:30, so 1 minute. Alrighty, well as you grab some water, you can still feel free to do that. Grab some water, whatever you guys need. We're going to start finishing up your writing, but we're going to get started. I'm curious, as we've started this discussion, the topic today of The Walking Dead, does anybody actually watch the show The Walking Dead? Okay, so Rachel.
I'm not caught up. But
Okay, so no spoilers today. No spoilers.
Christina?
What is the show?
I only watched like the
zombies.
first maybe 6 episodes or so.
Oh, she's like, I've only watched the first 6 episodes.
Okay. All right. So Rachel, for those of us that don't know, could you just like give a sentence to describe what the show is about, The Walking Dead?
It's about a zombie apocalypse.
Okay. So zombie apocalypse. So The Walking Dead. You know, zombies walking around. Okay. Now, those of you that don't know the show or do know the show, don't watch it. But what is our fascination with this show, or perhaps even just The Walking Dead in general? What do you think? Why are we so fascinated with this topic or the show? Richard, did you say something?
No, I took a breath.
Did you audition for this show?
I have not.
Oh, okay. You would be perfect for this show.
It's
Yeah.
shot in Atlanta,
Yeah.
so it's a little bit more difficult.
I see.
There's one in LA though. Fear the Walking Dead. It's a new series. And it's set in LA.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
set in LA, but it's shot in.
Not sure, but it's set.
It's called Fear of the Walking Dead.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's premiering soon. I think.
Interesting.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
But what's our fascination? That's the question. Why are we fascinated with this show? It's AMC's greatest hit it's ever had. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't know anything about the show. I feel shame.
No, it's fine. No.
Forgive yourself.
I don't really that show. I don't really have any influence, and I just haven't seen it. It's too late for me, or I don't know. But it's people. Zombies are so cool because they chase you and they look a bit like people, but they're not. And they fight you, and then you're one, and then everybody's one, and it's just zombies are.
I've never understood. Sorry.
People, there's a big, huge, like the zombie pub crawl things in London. They must have them here as well. People dress up as zombies,
Yes, they do.
and they go around, having drinks, and everyone's trying to take pictures with the zombie,
Yeah.
and it's just, it is really
Very good.
fascinating.
I don't understand it
Okay.
personally. I just think it's
Could be curiosity.
Curiosity? Okay. Curiosity about what, Gladys?
Like how would it be like or what how hard I know.
Okay.
I don't watch the show either. I don't know, but I'm just thinking maybe it could be curiosity.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm sorry, I was going to say the same. I don't know. I haven't watched the show, but I'm going to guess. I don't know, this curiosity of what's going on. What happens in the afterlife? What do you
Sure.
know about the afterlife? Whether
Yeah.
good or bad is scary.
Yeah. Richard, anything on
I think part of the draw of the show, for me at least, is a lot of the characters, how they change and how people act in desperate situations.
Sure.
And the survival thing, how it changes people.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a fascination with the show. I was looking up the show online. I'm getting prepared for it today, and it's like the #1 Halloween costume the last couple of years since the show's been on. So like, there is a huge fascination in our culture with the show in particular, but zombies or the Walking Dead in general. And I think that you guys have touched on it, right? This juxtaposition of like life and death, and something that is supposed to be dead but looks like it's dead, but it looks like it's alive, and oh, it's both alive and dead. Like, what does that even mean? Yeah, absolutely. I think we also do connect with these characters who are in a fight for their life, right? I think that we don't just connect with those who are fighting against the zombies. I think that we also, in some sense, have a connection with the zombies themselves. Those of us that have a 9-to-5 job, and we find ourselves in the mundane, in the routine of going day in and day out. Those of us that are pursuing careers in the industry, and we find that we give ourselves away almost so much that we find a part of ourselves die after each and every audition. And I think that this connection that we have with the zombies is culture-wide, whether it's subconscious or we know outright, that we're connecting with it on a deeper level than just we like zombies and we think that they're cool. In our passage today, we're going to be meeting a family, 2 sisters and a brother. Now the brother has just passed away, but what we find is it's not the brother who is the only one that's dead. When Jesus enters into the scene, we see that the sisters themselves are battling their own death. The death of being stagnant, the death of being stuck, and then the brother, the stench that comes about him from his dead body. And so we're going to open up to the book of John, so go ahead and grab a Bible. It's already marked, or open up on an app or anything that you may have. It's going to be John chapter 11. John chapter 11. Now, as we meet this family, I do want to share with you that Jesus is just arriving onto the scene. He most likely had a close relationship with this family. He probably stayed with them overnight before. This family was very well off, and so they probably, there's no evidence in Scripture that they gave money, but they probably did. At least just provide food and housing. They did support the ministry, and so Jesus' relationship with these 2 sisters and the brother extends beyond just another healing, just another encounter. He knew this family well, and that's important for us as we read through here. So we're going to start in verse 17 as we begin here. So verse 17, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus has already been dead in the tomb for 4 days. Interesting. Lazarus, a good friend, has been dead for 4 days, and Jesus is just arriving. Verse 18, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Okay, so he was coming from Bethany. It was only 2 miles away, and he's only arriving now. 19, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary, the 2 sisters, to comfort them in the loss of their brother. Okay, so the community has come, and Jesus is only arriving now. Verse 20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. All right, so Jesus is finally making his appearance onto the scene, and when Martha hears that Jesus is coming, she gets up and she goes, and she doesn't even wait for him to come to the house. She goes and she meets him where he is. Now, all of these details that I give you about Jesus only arriving now 4 days later, Martha knew them. She knew that Jesus could have been here, and she was probably wondering where he was. Having no capability to reach him by text message or to call him, she probably wondered, why has it taken him so long? And when she hears that he's coming, she goes out to meet him. And in 21, she runs and she meets him, and the first thing she says in 21 is, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And so in this statement we see that she has this belief about Jesus. This incredible belief that Jesus had the ability to prevent Lazarus from dying. It's an amazing belief that she's holding about Jesus. But along with this belief, she's holding a belief or a judgment about him. It's almost this underlining question of, you could have, you should have, where were you? I wonder if we in our lives, when we face traumatic events, as we've been probably digging up some of these traumatic events in our lives in our forgiveness study, I wonder if we have that same question about where God was as you're uncovering and discussing and working through some of these hard times. Where were you? You could have been there. You You should have been there. We're worried. Well, Martha doesn't stop there. She continues on with her statement in 22. She says, but I know, she's very intellectual, I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. And what she's saying here is, Jesus, it took you 4 days, but you're here now, and I know that with you comes good. And I'll take whatever good you can bring. And we're just so glad that you're here. So Jesus responds to this, her knowledge of him, and he says to her, you're right, good will come. He says, your brother will rise again. And Martha answers him, saying in 24, I know he will rise again at the resurrection, at the end of times, is what she's saying. And so what she's saying here is that Jesus, you're right. And I know this. She's so smart. I know that he's going to rise again in eternal life at the end of time. He will again in the future. I believe that. But doctrinal, we know that in the future. And then Jesus responds in 25, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. So in this statement, he's actually affirming her belief. That when you die, you will live again in eternal life. He's affirming her. He's like, you're absolutely correct. But then in 26, he starts with, and. He's adding to her belief, adding on to it. He wants her to go beyond. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. So he affirms her faith, but then he says, there doesn't need to be death even in life. And so what Jesus is saying here in an application for our forgiveness study, what he's saying is, when you die, you will live again in eternal life. But as you live, you don't need to experience spiritual death. You don't need to die with your brother, he's saying to her. This feeling that you have that you're being buried with him, you don't need to feel it. You know all these things, that I'm the resurrection, that I'm the one who's going to rise at the end of the days. You know that I had the ability to heal him, but what you don't know is that you don't need to die right now. At the end of these two statements that he makes to her, he asks her a question, do you believe this? He knows that she believes the first part, but do you believe this second part? And she responds in 27, yes, Lord. But then she goes on to give this list of things that she believes. She says, I believe that you are the Christ. I believe that you are the Son of God. And I believe that you are who is to come into the world. These three beautifully accurate, doctrinally correct statements that she's making. And I don't want to belittle this belief that she has, because these list of things that she has are things that the disciples themselves even struggled with. And she wasn't considered among one of the 12. And so this doctrinal list that she has is something that even today, if somebody believed, would be amazing, and we would consider that person to be a believer. But the problem with her knowledge, and her knowledge of Jesus being the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who was to come, is it wasn't having an impact on her life. It wasn't having an impact on this situation with her brother. And so Jesus is calling her to go beyond. Because what's happening with her knowledge is that it's actually paralyzing her. Her knowledge is becoming stagnant. And it's causing her faith to become stagnant as well. And instead of empowering her, her knowledge is paralyzing her. And so what Jesus is calling her to do is to go beyond her head knowledge. And the principle that we can take from this today as well is Jesus is calling us to go beyond our head knowledge. To go beyond the knowledge that we have that's keeping us stuck, and applying that knowledge to our lives. It's a living, breathing, empowered knowledge and faith that we have in who God is in our life. And so I wonder, how is your knowledge of God making a difference in your life today? And where in your life is God calling you to believe beyond your head knowledge? Well, after this interaction that Martha has with Jesus, she runs back home to go tell her sister that Jesus has arrived. So in 28, we see that she goes back and she calls her sister Mary aside. She says to her, Mary, the teacher is here, and he's asking for you. ooh, someone's in trouble, right? Right? The principal's calling, ooh, right? Well, Mary knows Jesus, and she knows that she's not in trouble, but she is in pain. And she has on her heart this death of her brother. And so as soon as she hears that Jesus is asking for her, we see in 29, as soon as she heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. And in 30, it's telling us again that Jesus had not even yet entered the village. He was still in the place where Martha had met him. And in 31, when the Jews, or the people, the community who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, notice how quickly she had got up and went. They followed her because they supposed that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. So Martha tells Mary, hey, Jesus is here. And she gets up so quick. It's as if Kathy got up right now and left. We're like, where is she going? Let's follow her. She must be going somewhere important. And so everybody gets up and they follow her to where she's going. And where she's going is not the tomb where her brother was, but she's going to Jesus himself. And in 32, when Mary reaches the place where Jesus was and she saw him, she falls at his feet. And she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. A verbatim statement straight from her sister's mouth. And we see these two sisters beginning to adopt a statement, a story statement about their family, with an underlining judgment of, you should have, you could have, where were you? And what's happening here is that this family is becoming story stuck. They're adopting this belief, adopting this understanding about this trauma that has happened, and they're phrasing it in a question, phrasing it in a statement to Jesus, where were you? Passing the blame, saying if you could have been here, and you should have been, and you weren't. When she says this to him, Jesus doesn't respond, and instead he asks her in 34, where have you laid him? We know that with this question he's deeply moved, he's deeply troubled by her crying, by her emotion. When he asks this, she says, come and see, Lord. And we see the whole community saying to him, come, we'll show you where he is. And in 35, 2 words, is actually the shortest verse in the entire Bible, Old Testament and New. Jesus wept. And you see this picture of this man, Jesus, crying. The community sees him crying, and they say, oh, see how he loved him, Lazarus? He loved him so much. And in 37, some of the other ones said, but could he not, who opened the eyes of the blind man, not have kept this man from dying? Almost to say, he healed the stranger on the street. What about those that he loved? Where was he? And so we find this story statement said by Martha, adopted by Mary, is becoming ingrained in the entire community. Jesus could have been there. He should have been there. And he wasn't. And so now the whole community is beginning to adopt this belief, this judgment that Jesus didn't do what he was supposed to do. Jesus is who he says he is, but if he doesn't do what he says he's going to do, then what good is he? And so as we see Jesus crying here, what we see is that Jesus' tears is not for the same reason as the community. We see this beautiful ability of Jesus to empathize. We see his humanity, that he was both fully man but also fully God. He's empathizing, not just understanding in an abstract sense, but fully connecting and understanding their pain. But his tears are not for the same reason that they're crying. He's not crying because Lazarus died. Instead, he's crying because he sees the effect of death on the entire community. He sees that this death has rendered the entire community dead also. The story that they're telling themselves is causing them to get stuck. And what he's calling the community to do is to get unstuck. And so the principle for us is that Jesus is calling us to believe beyond the stories that keep us stuck. So I wonder, what are the stories that are keeping you stuck? How are you using your forgiveness work to get unstuck? We have these two sisters that interact with Jesus. And there's one more family member that has yet to meet Jesus in this scene, and that's Lazarus, who's in the tomb. So Jesus makes his way to the tomb, and in 38, once more, he's deeply moved. And we see that this tomb is actually a cave with a stone that's laid across it. In 39, as Jesus arrives to the tomb, he orders, "Take the stone away." And at this order, the older sister Martha responds almost in a rebuke and says, "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been in there for 4 days." And so this practical and even physical aspect of her understanding, her knowledge that he's been in there for 4 days, he probably smells bad. What a disgrace to him who is now dead, and for us to be exposed to this dead body. But more than that, we know that in the Jewish custom, on the 3rd day is when the soul leaves the body. And so in this statement, Martha's not just saying he smells bad, she's saying his soul is gone. Lazarus is not just dead, he's dead. He's so dead, she says, that he smells. He has the stench about him. There's nothing you can do now, Jesus. Why are you taking away the stone? Why are you opening up the cave at this point? And Jesus responds in verse 40, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, not just know, not just think, if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And with this, in 41, we see that they take away the stone. So as we think about this stone that's being moved away, I want you to actually grasp what this scene looked like. If you would you take your hand and make the letter C with it? Because if we understand it was a cave, the letter C, and Lazarus was inside of it. Now the stone was flat, and it was rolled over the front of the cave. So if you take your other hand and roll it over the front of the cave. So you have a cave, and like this. As you look inside the cave, you realize that if Lazarus was alive inside, he wasn't. There was no way for him to remove the stone himself. It had to, from the grips of the stone on the outside, be removed from the outside. It had to be rolled away from the outside. First, it had to be ordered to be moved by Jesus, and it was. And the community themselves in 41 needed to help to remove the stone. There's a lesson in this for us. When we're stuck inside the cave, when a part of us has died, we're walking around dead, but we're stuck in our caves, in our lives. The stone needs to be ordered away. And it has been by Jesus Christ. But also, the stone needs to be removed for you to be able to come out. And there's sometimes, if not all the time, that you need some help from the outside to remove the stone. If you're stuck on the inside, there's no grip from the inside, you need some help from a therapist on the outside. Maybe it's a life coach. Maybe it's a friend or two to help you remove that stone from the outside. We can't always do it ourselves. We need the help, the way that Lazarus did, from the community to remove the stone. So as the stone is removed in 41, Jesus then looks up and he prays. And in this beautifully short prayer, it has some of the attributes of the axe across it that we talked about last week. He begins with Father, this adoration and this attribute that he's attributing to God. Father, I thank you in this thanksgiving. I thank you that you hear me. And in 42, I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, almost confessing for the people's unbelief. They don't believe that you hear me. I know you do. But I pray this so that they may believe that you sent me. And then in his supplication, he calls out in a loud voice. In 43, Lazarus, come out. And in 44, the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. So we see Jesus ordering Lazarus to come out of the tomb, bringing him back to life. He doesn't stop there. He continues at the end of 44. Jesus says to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. It's not enough for Jesus to bring them back to life. He orders for the grave clothes to be removed. And this last word, go, here, it's this common word that Jesus uses often. It's the commissioning, it's the go, the sending forth. Even a better translation here would be, let him live. Let him go, let him live. And we realize that this miracle that Jesus is performing is not just for the benefit of Lazarus. He could have just gone to the tomb by himself. But he performs this miracle in the presence of an entire community who was dead also. As if to say, as he's saying to us today as we're learning in our forgiveness work, I have the power to bring you back to life. But you have to remove the grave clothes and live. As we're identifying what those grave clothes are, we're identifying them on our minds. Our minds that are filled with knowledge of God, that are keeping us stagnant because it's not turning into active and powerful. We're identifying those grave clothes that are wrapped around our hearts, filled with stories of our pain from our past. Those stories that are keeping us stuck, preventing us from moving forward and rendering us dead. So Jesus is calling us to go beyond these stories that are keeping us stuck. So I don't want our time in our 6 weeks to end without us identifying those places that we have done. Identifying where we're still wearing those grave clothes. So I'd like to take a moment right now as we bow our heads and pray. Ask God to begin or continue and finish the unraveling of the grave clothes that are on our minds and on our hearts. Let's pray. Father, our forgiver, the one who has the power to bring us back from the dead, the one who has the power to call our name, to bring us back to life. We have sensed some awakening in this study, some parts of our lives that have been dead for a while, that you are bringing them back to life. Would you call them fully out of the grave today and right now? And as we walk out of the grave, we still have these grave clothes on us, God. Would you begin the removal of these linens around our face, our head, our minds, and our bodies? Would you unravel them now, and with them take knowledge that is stagnant. Take with it stories that are keeping us stuck, and instead give us new life. We thank you for your power. We thank you for new life. Be with us as we live again. We thank you for this community to do life with. So we start Sunday.
So we're going to stand, and we're going to end with a song in gratitude to God for the work that He has been doing and what He has done today. And this is Amazing Grace, and you can follow the words on the
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to hear, and grace shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. Forever mine. Love
And thank you all for letting me come. I'm sorry I can't make it next week.
Oh, what do we got?
But it's been great.
Thank you.
That was really great.
Next week is our last week. If you have not filled out the sign-up card for Crystal, please refill. Surprise. Also, next week's our last week, but then the following week is our fellowship. I think all of you guys got the invite. It's going to be food and fellowship, and not only bring something to share, maybe food-wise, but also spiritual food for what you've learned in class. You all have been doing that all along, but that's what will be a time. And of course, some fun games and all this as well. That's it. So, thank you. Yeah.
That alarm is more so I don't forget.
To go to
Those
break.
are- Yeah.